So right now, my friend Sean and his friend Ruby are working on developing some recitation work that I've done on the 3 Pure Land Sutras or Sukhavati Sutras, and they're going to work those up with English and Chinese screenshots. So I know many of you have enjoyed the previous collaborations between Sean and myself in terms of having gotten these profound Buddhist scriptures up with Chinese and English screenshots. So what I'm doing here is basically giving you a heads up to the fact that, you may see some of that over the course of the next few weeks and months. And what we'll be using is the BDK English translation of the 3 Pure Land Sutras, the 3 being, of course, the smaller sutra on Amitayus, and that'll be the first one that you'll see uploaded. I've actually got it uploaded already on my Pure Land Sutras playlist without text screenshots and simply with photographs. But again, I think many will find it of great interest to have the text screenshots available. And then there'll be the Sutra on Contemplation of Amitayus, which I'm currently in the process of reciting, and then the larger Sutra on Amitayus, which will be the most challenging one just simply because of its length. But on the other hand, this is also the one that Shinran talked about as being the true teaching in his Kyogawa Shinsho, his master work. All of these 3 Pure Land Sutras are being translated from the Chinese by Hisao Inagaki in collaboration with Harold Stewart. And what we're using is the revised second edition by BDK America Incorporated in 2003. Now, what I thought I would do is just recite a little bit from the translator's introduction to the 3 sutras, just so that those of you who may not have as much knowledge about the background of these important scriptures within the Pure Land path, a little bit more information about them. Inagaki says, "The Pure Land School is a form of Mahayana Buddhism that centers around the Buddha of infinite light and life, known in Sanskrit as Amitabha and Amitayus." And to my mind, Amitabha, being infinite light, represents the wisdom of the Buddha. And of course, infinite life, Amitayus, is a reference in my mind. Now, not everybody agrees with this, but it's basically, to my mind, a reference to the eternal life of the Buddha as described in the Lotus Sutra. He says in Chinese the pronunciation is Omitofu, and in Japanese, Amida. This Buddha, Amida Buddha, is said to dwell in the land of utmost bliss, which in Sanskrit is called Sukhavati. And so these are the 3 Sukhavati Sutras. Far to the west of this world, beyond the realm of samsara. Samsara, of course, being this world of suffering, this world of birth and death. So the pure land of bliss, the land of happiness, Sukhavati, is located supposedly in the western part of the universe. With boundless wisdom and compassion, Amitabha perceives the problems of those who are suffering from karmic results in samsaric existence and provides means of liberation for them. And of course, as that was ultimately refined by Shinran Shonin, we have a system of pure grace. But in these 3 sutras, you'll see and hear many more elaborated kinds of practices, including visualization practices that were at various times in the earlier iterations of Pure Land Path, of the Pure Land School, key practices that were encouraged among devotees to Amida Buddha. And again, by the way, this Pure Land Path has been followed by more tens of millions of Buddhists and is still very, very active and alive and dominant in some sense in East Asia. So, we don't hear about it as much in the West, although that's changing over the course of time. But these are very, very important kinds of scriptures for many, many people within Buddhism. So Inagaki says the most important scriptures of the Pure Land School, although the Pure Land is mentioned in many Buddhist Mahayana scriptures. Amida Buddha is mentioned in many scriptures. But again, these are the 3 in which the primary theme revolves around the nature of the Pure Land and the nature of Amida Buddha. The most important scriptures of the Pure Land School are the 3 texts presented in this volume. 1, the Sutra on the Buddha of Infinite Life, also known as the Larger Sutra on Amitayus, which is abbreviated to the Larger Sutra. The Sanskrit text is properly known as the Larger Sukhavati Sutra. And then 2, the Sutra on Visualization of the Buddha of Infinite Life, which is abbreviated as the Contemplation Sutra. And then 3rd, the Sutra on Amitayus Buddha, also known as the Amida Sutra, or the Smaller Sutra on Amitayus, which is abbreviated to Smaller Sutra. The Sanskrit text is popularly known as the Smaller Sukhavati Sutra. So again, we've got the Smaller Sutra, the Contemplation Sutra, and the Larger Sutra. And of course, it's in the Larger Sutra that Dharmakara Bodhisattva, the cosmic bodhisattva who became Amida Buddha, that he made his 48 vows in the presence of Lokesvara Raja Buddha. And of course, it's his 18th vow that's the key one that Shinran honed in on, and that others honed in on as well, as reflecting the essence of this easy path as contrasted with the path of sages, or the difficult path, which is articulated in many other Mahayana scriptures. So these sutras were chosen by Honen of Japan, who lived 1133 to 1212, who was Shinran's teacher. And actually, Inagaki makes the point that I just made a minute ago, is that there are many other sutras and discourses that mention Amitabha and his land of bliss. According to Professor Kotatsu Fujita, the total number of such scriptures in the Chinese Buddhist canon is 290. The Chinese canon, which was collected and edited in Japan under the title of the Taisho Tripitaka, contains 2,184 texts. Thus, more than 13% of all the scriptures held to be authentic in the Chinese tradition recognize this Buddha and his land. Amitabha was mentioned from the advent of the rise of Mahayana Buddhism in India, and eminent exponents of Mahayana metaphysical thought, such as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, took refuge in Amitabha and extensively promoted Pure Land faith and practice. Nagarjuna, of course, being the first one that talked in terms of the alternative of an easy path as contrasted with a difficult path. Vasubandhu, I think, wrote a treatise on the Pure Land, although I might be mistaken there. And at the end of the Awakening of Faith, which I'm reciting, the reference, which we haven't gotten to yet in my recitation, is also to the Pure Land as an Amida Buddha, as a path that people who may have more difficulties with the path of sages can tread with ease, available to everybody, available to people without great learning, without great ability to practice, people who had the challenge of living a life in the context of, well, life's challenges of, making a living, raising children, looking after a household, all these different things, which are even multiplied more so if the person is living in an era where there are natural disasters or wars, or, like we're facing now, the COVID-19 pandemic. From the beginning, Inagaki says, worship of Amitabha was clearly distinguished from Hindu worship of gods because it had its roots in the Bodhisattva ideal. And that's very, very important, that this whole Pure Land tradition, as Shinran does in his masterwork, the Kaogao Shinsho, and in other kinds of works that he wrote, it ties back to the Mahayana. So this is not something separate and apart from the broader great vehicle tradition. The Pure Land of Amitabha was also conceived of as more real than this ephemeral world of ours in samsara. The Pure Land Sutras and Discourses were first transmitted to Central Asia and then to China. The first Chinese translation of the Larger Sutra was produced in the middle of the 2nd century. Of the 5 extant translations of this sutra, the last was made in 980. Thus, the whole history of Chinese Buddhism was strongly characterized by Amida worship, and the Mahayana schools that developed in China recognized the importance of this Buddha and adopted into their systems practice and faith centering on Amitabha. Many discourses and commentaries were composed by dedicated Pure Land masters, and many images of the Pure Land were produced. And if you watch very many of my videos, it's hard to miss the fact that I love Buddhist art. And I'm reading an interesting book right now, just as a sidebar, on the sort of living Buddha images in the sense of how Buddhist images have been integrated over the course of time into the practice of both clergy or the elite as well as lay people, that these have played a central part in the Buddhist tradition, more so than simply as beautiful works of art. And if you look at any East Asian culture, the proliferation of various paintings, sculptures, etc., is just phenomenal. Again, on a sidebar, I think about China and the caves of Dongguan. Just unbelievable what people have done, which reflects that deep spirituality that really lies at the heart of Mahayana Buddhism. It's not a mere philosophy. Suzuki makes this point over and over in the Lankavatara Sutra, as he describes that particular scripture, that these things are not developed as a mere philosophy. These things are developed as an underpinning to sincere religious sentiment. So it says, among lay followers, as well as monks and nuns, the practice of repeating Amitabha's name, called Nanfo, or in Japanese Nambutsu, was and is enthusiastically performed by many Chinese Buddhists at home and abroad, to say nothing of millions of followers of the Pure Land denominations that developed in Japan, Korea, Vietnam, and other Asian countries. Now, this business of saying the Buddha's name, which I say is Namo Amida Butsu, the key aspect, or one key aspect of the evolution from Pure Land Buddhism or Jodo Shu to True Pure Land Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu, which was what Shinran's tradition was and is referred to as, is that earlier they felt like they needed to repeat the name over and over and over and over, and that there was more and more and more merit that could be accrued by doing that. But when we get to Shinran, he makes the interpretation that really only one recitation of the name is needed, and maybe not even that. Maybe just orienting the thought toward and trusting of Amida Buddha and the power of his 18th vow was sufficient. So again, that was a system of pure grace that really bypassed any requirements for what he called meditative or non-meditative practices. Non-meditative practices, for example, being repetition of the name of Amida Buddha. As a higher practice of Pure Land Buddhism, meditation on Amitabha and his Pure Land, based on the Contemplation Sutra and the Pratyutpana Samadhi Sutra, has been widespread from ancient times. Many devotees successfully followed the prescribed method and attained the samadhi of visualizing Amitabha and his Pure Land. And to be honest, I have not dived deeply into the Contemplation Sutra until fairly recently. But as now I'm reciting the thing, I mean, it really gives an elaborated sort of description that one can visualize in one's mind that can make the existence of this land of happiness in a sense more real, and of course of the Buddha Amitayus, as well as the primary two bodhisattvas who flank him, which are Avalokiteshvara, who represents infinite compassion. His name is translated regarder of the cries of the world, and on the other side, Mahastama Prompta, who I believe symbolizes wisdom. So Inagaki says, today, as it is impossible to follow the precise and complex method of visualization, simplified or syncretic forms of meditation are practiced by various groups and individuals. That's interesting. He says to follow the precise and complex method of visualization is impossible. Well, he's right about that, because when you actually hear the descriptions, it's incredibly elaborate. But also, the author of the Contemplation Sutra makes the point that it is impossible to visualize all the details, because the details are, let's face it, inconceivable. We get back to that basic Mahayana principle of inconceivability, that these are not, Amida Buddha and the Pure Land are not such that we can develop concepts in our mind that can fully describe and grasp them. These are non-graspable. And so that in effect says that it's impossible, but that's not to say that there isn't gratification for a person who is oriented toward wanting to try to visualize these ideal kinds of locations and figures. Contrary to the impression of the general public, Pure Land Buddhism is not a belief of ignorant people of the past. It is very much alive and still continues to supply inexhaustible spiritual energy to intellectuals as well as less educated people. But its doctrinal systems have yet to be fully studied from various perspectives. And this is true. That's the beauty of it, really, is that you can view and experience and embrace the Pure Land kind of approach from the most basic level, the most simple level, to that of the most complex in terms of, again, how it ties back into the profound Mahayana kinds of doctrine, the essence of which, of course, relates to the notions of sunyata and the suchness of our experience in the here and now as being, in many ways, the only reality. So the translator says, despite the importance of the three Pure Land Sutras, which are the primary source of devotion to Amitabha, Western scholars and Buddhist followers had long been without a readable English translation of these sutras, until publication of the first edition of this volume in 1995. As part of the BDK English Tripitaka series, we are now privileged to publish this revised second edition, which includes notes and an appendix. So, if you want to follow along with the book itself, I would certainly encourage you to get this book, the BDK English Tripitaka, the three Pure Land Sutras. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots. Namo Mita Boots.